What's up guys, Alex from Lakey Wargames here and welcome to today's Ossiarch Bonereaper's Tactics Guide, where I will be showing you the power of the Ossiarch Bonereaper's ranged projection power in what I like to call the ranged Killbox. So, welcome to today's video where I'm very excited to be sharing with you guys my new tactical idea of being able to deal a lot of damage at range with your Ossiarch Bonereapers, forcing the enemy to step within an 18 to 24 inch bubble of threats that you can create. Of course, it's well known that the OBR is primarily a melee focused faction, and that is where they will hurt you the most. But today we're going to be flipping that script upside down, and using the build that I'm going to show you, we can even dance around the latest change to Lookout Sir, which protects heroes from being hit by ranged attacks outside of 12 inches. Now before we get started, I would like to point out I'm not saying this is a new meta-breaking auto-win combination that every OBR player should be running from now on, but I merely want to open some eyes and really point out the strong combinations and potential of damage that even without leaning into the full build you might already have some access to in your lists, but not know that it's there or be combining it together for maximum effect. So the first thing is first, I said before that we can deal a lot of damage from afar with our OBR forces and even ignore that Lookout Sir for killing off heroes hiding among their units. But how do we do that? The only shooting power the book has access to is that of the Crawler, Harvester and the little bow from the Warband, and they're all rubbish. And you'd be right. But we're not going to be using any of those units and instead focusing heavily into projecting a lot of magical damage from across the table. The neat thing about spells and damage from magic is they're not classed as missile attacks and therefore can ignore the no target penalty that Lookout Sir infers for shooting heroes. The ranged magic damage is something that OBR actually has in spades when you focus them all together, and with this you can really lay her into enemy units or wipe smaller heroes with no trouble at all. So, first of all, let's look at the units that we need in order to pull out this combination. Now this is just my personal preference in units to use to get heavy range damage across the table with my OBR, but you can add in some more spice to this list or even just take a couple of units from here and mix and match them how heavy you might want to lean into this idea. The list of units I would recommend to pull this off are Arcan the Black, a Mortisan Soulreaper, a Mortisan Boneshaper, the Nightmare Predator Endless Spell, and lastly your Bone Tithe Nexus Terrain Piece. So now that we know which units we're going to be using to achieve this, let's break down what each of these units are bringing to the table for us and how they can help us magically decimate the enemy. The first and definitely most important part of this combination is the Mortarch of Sacrament himself. Firstly, Arcan is an amazing wizard piece to have in any OBR force. Being a 3-cast wizard with a built-in 2+ to all his casting rolls, it means he can be very reliable for us to chuck out any high-end spells that we may try and cast, as well as perform this greater casting multiple times. Arcan is also the reason we're able to reach out and really hurt the enemy and set up the idea of this Killbox. His first of the Mortarch's ability, adding 6 inches to the range of any friendly Death Wizard's spells cast wholly within 18 inches of him, means we can really reach out and hurt heroes that may be trying to hide in the enemy backlines. Also, this lets us from the start of the game reach out and start blasting enemy ranks with magic damage from the safety of deployment or even behind our own screens. On top of all of this, he brings his signature spell, Curse of Years, which has the potential for unlimited mortal wounds on a unit if you roll well enough for it. If not though, thanks to Ryan from Stratagoy YouTube channel for running the math on this for me, but it deals 3.8 mortal wounds on average, which may not sound like a lot on its own, but can be a very lovely chunk of damage when trying to perform those hero snipes, especially when we start to combine it with the other units that we will be taking. Speaking of the other units, the second on our list is a Mortisan Soulreaper. Now, he is a rather unpopular choice. The Mortisan Soulreaper is usually something I'm not a fan of, but when combining his War Scroll spell Soul Blast in an Arcan list, it's perfect for obtaining that goal that we want of dealing ranged magic damage. It's usually D3 mortal wounds with a casting value of 6 and a range of only 12, but that now becomes 18 inches thanks to Arcan. It can be a straight up 3 mortal wounds if you get within 3 inches of an enemy unit, but the awesome thing about this spell is that it works like a pumped up arcane bolt. So you cast it and then you keep hold of it, and you can unleash it at the start of any phase before your next hero phase. This means you can even put it in your back pocket when you're not in range, and then use it when you move up into range, or if the enemy walks into you. It will really make them think twice if there's an important unit to them with three or less wounds left and stepping within 18 inches of the range of your Soulreaper. Next up on our list is the Bonereaper. The Bonereaper is a fantastic hero you'll want in an OBR list 99 times out of 100 anyway, for his fantastic support healing ability. But also, being a generic one-cast wizard is like the icing on top of the cake for this guy. If needs be, he can simply just use a normal arcane bolt for us and deal a single mortal wound, as and when needed for the hero sniping. There's nothing more frustrating than trying to take out a hero and they live with one wound left, so our Bonereaper will act like the perfect cleanup tool if we need him to. The other neat and unique thing that he can bring to the table for us is something that I really think is underrated by most players from him, and that is his War Scroll spell, and can really put a decent dent into horde units if you need to. Shardstorm has a casting value of 5, so it's nice and easy to cast. It's a range of 18, which is now boosted to 24 inches thanks to Arcan, and you get to pick one enemy unit and roll a dice for each model in that unit, and on a 5+ they suffer 1 mortal wound. This spell alone, say into 40 clan rats or 60 zombies, you can really inflict some hurt. If you combine this spell alone with something like a Bonetie Shrieker endless spell, where you can kill off a fair amount of models already, and now stopping them being immune to battle shock, you can really hurt them by making a handful more units run away at the end of that turn. Next up on our list is the Nightmare Predator Endless spell. This endless spell is one of my favourites. Not only does it look really cool, but it's straight up honest and easy endless spell to use. And it can really put in some work which no one really expects with 40 points. It can be admittedly a little swingy at times, but when it does work, it is a lot of fun to use. We can use this spell in multiple ways of dealing damage where we might need it to be, and this spell is also perfect for playing that hero hunting game that we're leaning into. A low casting of 5 means that any of the heroes in our list have a good chance of casting it, even more so if Arcan tries to cast it. It has a setup of 12 and moves 8 inches with flying. That setup once again can be boosted by Arcan, means it's not only a setup of 18 inches, but combined with its amazing move, it has a threat range of 24 inches to reach out and lay down its hurt. After the spell moves, you roll a dice for every unit you have moved over, and on a 2+ you D3 mortal wounds to that unit. Then again, after you've moved, you get to pick one enemy unit within an inch of where it landed and roll another dice. Again, on a 2+, you deal another D3 mortal wounds. This means not only can we do multiple mortal wounds on any enemy units lined up next to each other, so long as we can fly over them, but you can easily hit an enemy hero or a single entity like a monster for up to 2d3 mortal wounds. Opening up alone with this means you could wipe out a small 5 wound hero with just this spell, which again for 40 points is just amazing potential. Now the last item on our list is one that a lot of non-OBR players will often forget can be a threat to them. But looking at all the mortal wounds that we can pump out and ignore the Lookout Surfer with already, it would just be rude to ignore the free terrain piece that we have access to in every list that we build, and we can also lean into this. The Bonetithe Nexus can perform many different roles, but for this combo we're more interested in the Punishment of Death ability which it has. This simply just picks an enemy unit within 18 inches of the terrain piece, you roll a dice, and on a 4+ they suffer D3 mortal wounds. You can get this off on a 3+ if any enemy models was slain within 12 inches of the terrain feature in the previous turn, and because this is just in the hero phase for timing, we can try and go for this first, because it's not exactly the most reliable thing on a 4+, but if it hits an enemy for 3 mortal wounds before you even try casting any other spells, this can be a fantastic turn opener. Just remember, even if it doesn't do any damage, it's from the free terrain piece anyway, so it's win-win just to go for it. So now that we've seen the units that we wish to perform all this range damage with, let's take a little overview at the potential that we could do. So Arcan can do 3.8 mortal wounds from Curse of Years on average, up to an unlimited amount of mortal wounds at 24-inch range. Our Soul Reaper can do D3 to 3 mortal wounds at 18 inches to 3 inch reach for us. The Mortis and Boneshaper can do 1 mortal wound from Arcane Bolt at 24 inches, or on average 2 mortals for every 10 models in a Horde unit. The Nightmare Predator does D3 mortal wounds on as many units as you can fly over, and 2d3 mortal wounds to a single target. And the Bone Tithe Nexus is also doing D3 more mortal wounds for us. That means if we focused all of these together, we can do anything from 8.8 mortal wounds minimum to 16.8 mortal wounds maximum, and that is still only including 3.8 for Curse of Years at the max, because, well, it's incredibly swingy to try and get more than that, so we're just using its average. And that is a very nice amount of ranged damage to inflict immortals from 18 inches to 24 inches away for a combat army, in my opinion. Especially one as strong in combat as OBR. Depending on how else you choose to build your list, you can safely be sitting behind and within your Mortek castle, slinging these spells out from behind it, causing some havoc while you close the gap. Now, before I go, I do want to add that on the math side of things, I know this isn't 100% accurate, as you have to factor in getting all the spells off, passing any dice checks, etc. But it is just a rough idea that if you landed your spells, it's nice to know, using this way as a way to snipe heroes, that you'll be hitting a low of 8.8 mortal wounds, even if you rolled all ones for your D3 checks. This means if you mix and match in a few that might be a little bit higher than that, your chances of killing off a 5 wound hero is not that bad at all. If you roll some 3s for some of your D3s and some 1s for some others, getting to that 5 wound target is very achievable. This sort of really targeted damage and at range that we can hit them from will really sneak up on an enemy who is often, as you think with OBR, will just want you to fight up close. The nice thing is that all the heroes and units that we've spoken about aren't just taken for this purpose alone, and they can all perform multiple other roles within your list. So, if you do roll really badly for the turn and this tactic doesn't work out the way you hoped, maybe you failed the damaging spells, or they just didn't do enough damage, it's not like these units aren't going to be doing other things for you, and they can just perform their secondary action roles within your list instead. But what do you guys think of this ranged kill box idea? Is daring the enemy to step into that 18 inches to 24 inch box something you've tried or would be interested in trying? Maybe just trying a few of these units in your list to mix and match in some damage as you close that gap. Let me know in the comments down below, or hop over into the Discord server, link in the description for more deep diving discussions. I would love to hear your thoughts on this tactic and combination of units. But until next time guys, stay safe, happy wargaming. Psst, hey you! Did you know that Lakey Wargames now has an official eBay store? You can buy yourself all kinds of pre-painted and new on sprue hobby goodness and support the channel at the same time. There's a link in the description below if you want to check it out. I'd greatly appreciate it, and it's a fantastic way to support the channel. Okay, see you in the next one.